It ain't mine.
In the dark you shine, burning tighter in the night. In the dark
Alrighty, it is March 19th. This is our fourth straight PFF forecast. That's how you day 4 of quarantine, and it's the fourth podcast. How are you hanging in over there, brother?
Things are good. Honestly, before I started working at PFF, my hours were so strange because I teach and then I would work in the middle of the night. I've sort of like acquired those hours. So I noticed you sending the Slack message at like 2 a.m. being like, "Hey, Slay got traded," and I'm like, "Sweet!" Like we're
You
like
were
the only
on
two
it.
up. We're
You
like the
were
only
on
two
it.
awake. But then that means like getting up at like 9:30 is a struggle. So I might by the time everything gets normal again, my hours are it's gonna be an adjustment.
I've been getting up at 4:45 because I'm on the West Coast, and I can I can totally understand why people that live on the West Coast just ignore like everything that happens everywhere else because it's impossible to try and stay on that timeline. Um, so that's my big takeaway from the quarantining process. We're gonna do some fun stuff today. So here's what we've got. We're gonna do a little TB12 versus Bill Belichick debate. I think that'll be kind of interesting. Look at both sides of it. Talk Darius Slay, obviously. We're going to talk a little bit about how maybe the Patriots' next move might influence, kind of some things that happen league-wide. Maybe we'll talk about Todd Gurley. Who knows? To be seen if we can reach an agreement there. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the draft and how the moves that have been made so far, including the Darius Slay one perhaps, indicate some changes that might happen in the draft. So let's start here. Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, who makes it to a Super Bowl first? I'll give you the floor. I'll let you go first here.
Well, I don't think Brady's going to last very long, so I'm going to go with Belichick.
How long do you think he plays?
I think
Years?
Brady plays 2 more years. I think he plays 2 more years.
So basically, you're looking at and you're going, okay, Tampa Bay's got two shots. They have to go through, an NFC that is good, but they don't have one team or even maybe two like the AFC has, where you go, they're for sure an underdog to this quarterback or this team, right? Like certainly we could see a case going into this season. We talked about this yesterday, where the Patriots could be the favorite, right? The Bucs could be the favorite, right? Some things could happen, some moves could be made. They didn't get Chris Harris Jr., but there's still some guys out there, right? Say they sign Emmanuel Sanders, right? And all of a sudden they've got that trio of wide receivers, those two tight ends. I just think there's so many different things that could happen that could make them at least one of the favorites, if not the favorite in the NFC. On the other side, though, the Patriots, for my money, that hinges basically on a draft pick hitting, right? Because who else? It doesn't seem like there's anyone that's coming in there this side of Andrew Luck who is making them all of a sudden a contender again, right?
Andrew Luck is an interesting one.
Yes,
you're right, but go ahead.
I was going to say, if he were to come out of retirement, can he just go to any team? He still has the Colts still have his rights.
Yeah, the Colts still have his rights. So it would have to be a situation where they work something out, which would make it difficult for them. But it's just, to me, it's about time horizon. The Brady has 2 years probably to do it, and Belichick probably has 5 to 10 years to do it.
I think it might be less than that for Bill, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say I would lay a decent amount, if you were offering me even money on neither one, I would bet the max
on Bill.
No, on neither one winning.
Oh, okay, right. But what if you had to bet one? If you had to bet one side to make it, just to make it there?
I would still say it's tough because the AFC is a lot harder than the NFC
Yeah,
at the top end. Uh
it's not. It's not
it's
that
not
easy.
easy, but I would still say Belichick because I do think he's got at least twice as much time.
Okay. All right. So this brings us to, I think the real question is, I would expect the Bucks to have a shot, right? You would expect them to make it to an NFC championship, over the next 2 years. Give them a shot, right? Like I think that's a decent expectation. For the Patriots, right now it looks like Jarrett Stidham. Let's just talk about Jarrett Stidham for a second. Like, what do we know about Jarrett Stidham? Not very much. I watched all 5 of his passing plays from last season.
Fire.
If anyone gets on TV and starts using what he did last season, they should be fired immediately. And then I went and took a look at what he did at Auburn, and it was very interesting. He had a decent junior year, and then a very unimpressive senior year that led him to be our 10th quarterback on the board.
Yeah, he was a negative. So I make fun of Jordan Love for having a 0 wins above average. But Stidham was negative in 2018. In the college to pro system, his comps were Colt McCoy, Josh Allen, EJ Manuel, Blake Bortles. And so I would say when I first saw that, I think Belichick's tanking, and that's okay. Like he's, I think, a perfect tank quarterback. And what we talked about yesterday, I think holds true. Like even if you get, like, let's say that you want to get a quarterback to come in and help you tank, like they're not going to practice probably till what, July, August. Like they're not going to be in the building. So he at least has a year in the offense. People probably like him there, locker room wise. And so I think it makes a lot of sense for them to go with Stidham, but it makes a lot of sense for them to go with Stidham and then tank.
If they ride with Stidham, there should be no question that they're tanking. If they go with, say they trade for Jacoby Brissett, to me that would send a signal of maybe we're not tanking, and maybe Bill Belichick has too much pride in himself. To me, that question about who makes it back to a Super Bowl first is how much overconfidence does Bill Belichick have in himself to win with anyone? Because if you're telling me, hey, the Patriots are going to make it back to a Super Bowl before Tom Brady, or first, that hinges on them tanking this year and getting a truly great quarterback with the first or second pick, whether it's Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, and that guy being maybe not Patrick Mahomes, but having a similar impact on a team with a great infrastructure. And over the next 4 years, they're able to make it back. Whereas Tom Brady's retired and calling Monday Night Football at that point. If they go Jacoby Brissett, to me that signals actually we're going to try and win now. I bet you I could still be better than Arians and Brady.
Yeah, I don't, maybe he's a little bit more this way, but I don't see Belichick as somebody who's petty enough to want to beat Brady. Like I think Belichick is somebody who is trying to win the Super Bowl and sort of knows that anything. I mean, you're right. If Stidham was the quarterback, it would be a very clear and obvious tank. If Josh Rosen was the quarterback, you could make an argument that there's something, like Teddy Bridgewater was the quarterback all the way up to Cam Newton and Jameis. You can make an argument that there's some level of trying to win there, right? Yep. But like I just see Belichick as somebody who's saying, look, I have the most storied career in the history of the NFL as a head coach. I want to coach longer. I said this to you in Slack. It's sort of like how people are responding to the coronavirus, right? It's like, okay, I can try to live life normally and take a gamble that this is nothing, and have my life only minimally inconvenienced, right?
Yep.
for essentially what is called selling the tail. Like, I'm going to sell the fact that this could be a catastrophic thing, right?
Yep.
And to me, that's what the Patriots would be doing if they try not to tank this year. They would acquire some quarterback like Cam Newton. They try to make things be moderately okay. And at the same time, like, there's still a huge chance that they're not any good anymore, and they're going to have to tear it all up anyway. And whereas, you could be taking the approach that, we as a society are taking right now, which is to quarantine for months, and all take a big inconvenience right now for the chance that everything is mostly back to normal in a few months. Right. And I think that that's what Belichick's sort of thinking about. It's like, well, like, let's just not do this half-ass. Let's like come out of this an actual team, on the back end and get to do everything from scratch. Right. Because right now, like, if you try to, like, look at what Minnesota's trying to do. It's, for God's sakes, it's like everything is so like hodgepodge. So like, how does everything fit together? There's no, and all they're trying to do is get to 10-6, right? Whereas at least I think what Belichick's trying to do is to be sustainably good in 2021 and beyond.
Right. The Bears are certainly taking the first approach, which is I have scheduled a spring break in Florida, and come hell or high water, I'm going to be French kissing someone I've never met before within the next 24 hours. And if I get coronavirus, I'm going to fight it off. And that's what the Nick Foles move is like. The funny thing is that there's still a group that you haven't mentioned yet, which are the people that think the apocalypse and Bird Box is about to happen and are buying like essentials as if, there are going to be aliens out there, like with never before seen weapons that are hunting us down within the next week. I don't know which NFL team that is, but the Patriots tanking would certainly be the shrewd move, which is, hey, for 2 months, for 1 year, I can very easily sacrifice some of these creature comforts, like being an average NFL team, right? And then 2 years from now, I can potentially go back to living in an economy that's in a great place, and all these things are much better, and my life is great. Whereas I don't, and I don't risk the actually we're in recession for 2 years whole type deal.
Yeah, and do you think that being an average football team has any appeal, has any value to Belichick?
Right. Probably not. Right.
So everybody praises him for the Matt Castle year, but like in all honesty, that year is probably seen as a waste from him.
When your boat is named after the number of Super Bowl rings you have, you do not care about being an average football team.
Yeah.
When you're Ryan Pace and you traded up for Mitchell Trubisky, you would trade a boat for 9 and 7, which is essentially what they're trying to do. They are doing anything and everything to have some possibility of saving an average season.
But
because
it's
if
also
Trubisky's bad, they can go with Nick Foles.
Well, and this is something I've thought about as a research project. Is this idea of it's not ergodic, right? It's not time averages and spatial averages are different than each other. So Ryan Pace's time average and his spatial average are, I'm trying to think of like a way to think about it, but like Pace is making decisions that are his time horizon's shorter, right?
He doesn't. Ryan Pace doesn't have 5 years.
So, because the issue is like everybody always talks about those experiments with Kahneman and Tversky and Richard Thaler, where you offer somebody the side of a bet and it's 55-45, and almost everybody takes the wrong side and they call it risk aversion. But in reality, I mean, there's some level of staying alive. There's some level of like keeping, and Belichick has such a smaller probability of ruin than almost any of these guys. So he can make decisions that are sort of more, he can make more bets that are different, right? Whereas Pace is sort of has to make these like silly bets, all individual silly bets just to lower his probability of ruin. And it's an interesting problem to think about.
One thing that I was thinking about with the Patriots possibly tanking and how right that decision would be is whether that, if they do it, impacts the way that the rest of the league works. Because the Dolphins, didn't execute a tank very well, right? They end up with a 5th pick. Now maybe it works out and they get Tua, but certainly the goal is to get the number 1 guy. And you look at the Bears and you go, okay, what if the Bears right now said we're going to wipe the slate clean and we're going to let Mitchell Trubisky go out there and be terrible, and we're going to trade any asset that we have, and we're going to try and draft a quarterback next year. Now, I think they really can't do that because they made the Khalil Mack trade, which looks worse and worse, as we talked about by the day. But part of me wonders, if they did that, could Ryan Pace get like this second go at it? And I think if the Pats execute this well, that'll allow teams that are in a similar situation to actually be able to go to their owner and go, hey, I know I fucked up. I know Mitchell Trubisky's bad. I know that I traded all these assets for a defensive player who doesn't, in the grand scheme of things, much matter because my quarterback sucks. But we're going to execute a tank. I'm the guy to lead the charge. And that might actually work.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and the hard part is of course, the hard part is convincing your owner that you're the right person for that long-term deal, because
Yes.
Because the history of the NFL is littered with GM of the year who are basically just regression recipients,
Yeah.
and that, and so owners think like, well, if I make a switch at GM, I'm going to get that, it's sort of like that scheme change article that I came out with. I was like, well, a lot of this is just having to do with you change coordinators when you're bad and you get better as a result. But, it's tough.
all about humility. So if you go into it when you're about to take Mitchell Trubisky and you put you lay your balls on the table and you go, hey, we're going to trade up for this guy. All of a sudden, when you come back and say, hey, we need to tank, you look like kind of a hypocrite, right? Because you said, actually, I know so much more than everyone else that I'm going to move up instead of let things happen. But if you always preach, hey, this is a game of chance, we are going to give ourselves as many chances, right? Then when you come back to the bargaining table and you say, hey, the chances we took didn't work out, but we now need to be smart and quit while we can, quit early and start again. That gives you some credibility because at least you are still following a philosophy that's logical. Whereas I think Pace has tied his hands behind his back because he can't say that now. He said, oh, Trubisky's the guy. I'm trading up. Oh, Trubisky's the guy. I'm going to now trade 2 firsts for Khalil Mack, right? So now you come to the table and the guy looks, the owner looks at you and goes, Virginia McCaskey's like, you're an idiot.
We got some comments on the YouTubes. One person whose name is Defund NASA says Bill Belichick would never tank.
Interesting. I don't think that is a ridiculous statement to make, because Bill Belichick, just the same reasoning I used, which is to say, hey, I have a boat with a number of rings on it. It, says, hey, I'm a prideful dude. And if I think that there's a shot in a weak division that with an average quarterback, I can get myself to the playoffs, and then in the playoffs, I can scheme defenses to the point where I can beat anybody. And how great would that be? Because if he could do it, if he could win or get to a Super Bowl with fucking Jacoby Brissett, he's retiring immediately, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't think that's
I agree, but I think he's far smarter than that. Like, okay. He's the coach that takes like he's the coach that they used to call him Doom when he was the defensive coordinator of the New York Giants, because he considered all the bad possibilities. And I don't know.
I want to push back on that. I think you're giving Bill Belichick a little Greg Popovich service. Everyone in the NBA thinks Greg Popovich is the smartest coach to ever walk the face of the earth because David Robinson got hurt and they were terrible and got Tim Duncan, and he's certainly a very good coach, but like those things matter. And now the Spurs don't have a great Tim Duncan and they're really, really fucking average. And the Patriots have made, they're not on the cutting edge of fourth down decision making. They have done a very good job of not, overpaying pass rushers, but that could be just a result of Bill Belichick's pride. to be perfectly honest. And they have had a really great quarterback for a really long time. So to immediately just say that he's too smart to make that move, to me, one of the bigger takeaways I've had through free agency is, again, no one is really that. I think the Ravens maybe are, but aside from them, no one is really that galaxy brain, right? Like a lot of teams are just lucking into things, and we either say, hey, they're smart or they're not based on where their luck falls.
I do agree with that. And we've reiterated that a number of times. Oftentimes we ascribe meaning to things that are just noise. For Belichick, it is interesting because this will be a test as to whether or not he's on the side of somebody who's gotten lucky a lot, or the side of somebody who has a process, or which sort of spot on the continuum he is. I sort of think he's more process oriented, but I could be wrong. And he also is getting older, right? And so his maybe some of the things I think about with respect to ruin and winning today versus winning in 10 years, some of those things might not apply as much as they did 10 years ago.
Yeah. I think if I had to lead one way, I would lean that he will try and compete this year, but I am firmly in the camp that the only move for the Patriots is to tank right now and to get Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields or whoever it is the number one quarterback coming out next year. And it seems like you're leaning the other way.
People in the comments do not think that the tanking is part of the Patriot way. I am firmly on the side of they should tank. And I also am not necessarily sure that they should tank for the quarterback next year. I think this might be a multiple year thing, because Belichick, unlike literally every other coach in the NFL, maybe save Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan, has the equity to tank for multiple years.
And that is very true. And I'm honestly not surprised that people think it's not the Patriot way, because we've had 20 years of them being excellent, right? So that makes perfect sense. And that's why I agree that I think if I had to go with what they end up doing, it is not tanking. Let's talk Darius Slay to Philly. So they traded a third and a fifth, it appears, and Philly, unlike their friends in Dallas, when they trade for someone with value, immediately have signed him to a deal. It looks, I think I'm getting this right, is it like 3 for $40 or something like that?
Yeah, that's what isn't it
50?
Isn't it more? Yeah, is it more than the Byron Jones deal, I think?
Okay. I'll find out right now. But just, on the face of this, here's the thing with Darius Slay. Last season did not earn a very high grade. Seasons prior has been incredibly solid. A lot of that last season was what we have found with coverage, right? Which is that it's unstable.
Yeah, and Moo and I were talking about this on Twitter. The thing about trading for veterans when they're cornerbacks is that oftentimes you can get some value because you're buying at the trough, right? You're not buying, with defensive ends and linebackers and other positions. The stability is sort of baked into the price, whereas the instability, I think, is still a market inefficiency for corners. And so Slay had a rough year last year, but then the Detroit Lions rushed the least number of players in the NFL, and he was asked to cover a pretty solid collection of number one receivers on other teams, and he struggled, and that's going to happen. He was also hurt a little bit as well. So I think Philadelphia makes a good bet here. Doesn't mean he's going to work out, and I think Malcolm Jenkins is a big loss for them, but it's a good bet for them to make because they've been abjectly awful at the position for the last 2 seasons.
No, so it's 3 for 50, 30 guaranteed, and
a lot.
One of the takeaways that I had looking back on free agency was exactly what you said. There is value to be had at positions where volatility should be expected. And when there's value tied to those positions, you should still invest in them, right? And it's basically, it's honestly a great analogy to what's happening right now in our economy, right? Like currently the economy is getting bludgeoned. What are smart people doing? They're investing right now, right? Because they've set themselves up in a position to do so, and they will profit later. And to me, that's what the Eagles are doing here. If I had to pick one move that, other than Tom Brady going to Tampa Bay, that will have the biggest impact on what we're watching in the playoffs, it's this one. Because the Philadelphia Eagles have not been able to cover anybody. And Darius Slay, taking out last year, the 3 years prior, is the 5th or 6th, I believe, highest graded outside corner in the NFL.
Yep.
So that gives you the potential to knock everyone down a peg and to all of a sudden go from having no one that can cover to having a decently deep secondary if they make a couple of other moves.
Yeah, I think so too. And the only impediment is the fact that the Dallas Cowboys are probably still way more talented than they are.
Yep.
But the path to a wild card in the NFC is pretty clear for them because they, you look at that division, it's still pretty weak. Washington's actually strangely made some pretty good moves. Kendall Fuller being one of them. But the Giants are still kind of a mess. And so there's still a decent amount of,
So think about this, because you're right. The Cowboys, however, just let their top corner go.
Yep, and they have, and the guy that's in his stead is kind of like a practice squad guy right now. Like they don't have somebody replacing him.
So we could see a flip flop of, coverage stability. Basically, like you wrote an incredible article about how much being solid in coverage is important, and all of a sudden we could see the Cowboys not be solid in coverage. They have been over the past couple of years relative to the Eagles, and the Eagles could be. And this is why you sign your quarterback early instead of pushing it forward. Because last year, the Cowboys dealt with a ton of noise. They always deal with a lot of noise. And they're setting themselves up to deal with more noise than they ever have before because a Dallas Cowboy quarterback who's probably going to play well again, given the environment that he has, isn't going to be signed long term. Whereas the Eagles are just going to be sitting there. Maybe they get better injury luck. Maybe they sign Robbie Anderson. Maybe they sign Rashad Perriman. Maybe they draft Justin Jefferson or Denzel Mims. Right? Maybe their offensive line doesn't get a ton of injuries. Their secondary doesn't get a ton of injuries. And that vision all of a sudden just flips.
Yeah, and that's always the risk that you have when you buy stars, right? And stars are sort of the fulcrum, or you build a team full of stars and then a star leaves. That's always the difficulty. We know that Philadelphia values sort of depth more so, and why they were able to win the division last season despite a lot of players being out, and how they won a Super Bowl in 2017 doing so because they understand they value sort of the weak links of the team better than most teams do.
I'm with you. I'm bullish on the Eagles once again. Hopefully, this is setting up too perfectly for them to be the
Falcons. They are the Falcons.
Oh my God, we can't. Yeah. Apparently, they're interested in Yannick Ngakoue too, which obviously it depends how much they would pay him, right? Are they getting him for a deal? Probably not. And this is going to send Philadelphia Eagles Twitter into a frenzy. That would be. What do you think they would have to pay for him?
Well, I think he's probably in that $20 million a year range. The Frank Clark was actually 21 something, which is just, I don't know, man. If you, after you adjust for circumstances, Ngakoue is a little bit better than average as a pass rusher. So you're paying a lot for a player who's probably still going to be productive for you, but probably production you can get elsewhere.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This would take a lot of the things I just said away. If you're the Eagles, so this is where the luck versus process comes into play, right? If you or I are running the Eagles, we go, okay, we got Darius Slay. What's the next coverage guy we can get? Because we know that a star alone does not make your coverage unit strong. And then they go, okay, we got Darius Slay. We're good. Now we just need another pass rusher. And to me, that is they've invested a ton in their pass rush, right? They have Brandon Graham, they have Fletcher Cox, they drafted Derek Barnett. Like, to me, this would make no sense. So I'll be very interested to see what the Eagles do with this going forward. I had on here larger free agent takeaways for us to talk about. I've given a couple of mine. Are there any others that you've had over the past few days just watching everything that's happened?
Well, I'm very happy with, as somebody who roots for the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm very happy that they have sat out. I'm a little bit interested in the interior defensive lineman market. Michael Pierce going to the Vikings for $9 million. Obviously Buckner for 21 to the Colts. It's really interesting for me to see what'll happen with Chris Jones, because I don't know what the Chiefs are going to get as compensation for him, and they're sort of hamstrung right now. They have yet to cut Sammy Watkins, so they're basically right at the cap. So that's an interesting one. But just some teams that are making, like Detroit seems to be making a string of pretty good decisions. The Dolphins seem to be making a string of pretty good decisions, namely Byron Jones. So the two Belichick disciples appear to be doing some good things. And I tweeted this out the other day. I was like, I'm not going to get my hopes up about Detroit. Like, I'm just not going to allow this to happen for the second straight year. But I do think that they're looking okay. And then there are just teams that are just head scratchers. The Minnesota Vikings make zero sense to me. They just said that they didn't want to resign Mackenzie Alexander because the price is too high. He goes to the Bengals, who sign him for 1 year, $4 million. The Vikings pay Shamar Stephen $5 million a season. They just paid a fullback $4 million a season, and their punter $3 million, and a nose tackle $9 million. So I don't understand what's going on there. It does appear like this is the last season for Zimmer and company. Obviously, it's good that none of these running backs are getting signed other than Jordan Howard. There's a lot of and no wide receivers really. Wide receiver and running back have been mostly silent in this free agency period, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah, I think those are all excellent big takeaways. One other one that I had is the importance of, we spend a ton of time looking at the result and using prior results that are stable to predict, future results. And one of the things that I think is like a real life tangible takeaway from looking at this is that being able to manage people is really important if you want to have good numerical results on the field. And I look at DeAndre Hopkins. I look at Darius Slay. I look at players who have a tremendous amount of value, and because of a mismanagement, are getting, DeAndre Hopkins literally given away, like an absolute, just a disaster for a franchise. And you need to have people who understand how to work with people. They can't just be diagramming plays. They just can't be only setting up a game plan, because if you do, you are going to lose players that can actually help you win games. And I just don't think every NFL team, many NFL teams, do not have that structure in place, and it's going to show up on the field.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It's amazing how, those things get compartmentalized, and then this time of year we just have, those things get compartmentalized, and then this time of year we are left wondering why all these inconsistencies happen. But I can see, just the point you just made, it's like maybe what percentage of teams, 25 to 28 total, are just sort of swimming, and we're seeing the outcome of that.
Yeah, Stephon Diggs is another one, right? DeAndre Hopkins and Stephon Diggs are two of the top easily 10, right? Maybe you could say 5 or 6 if you want to put Diggs in there. I happen to think Diggs is phenomenal receivers in the NFL, and none of them have done anything that has been made public to insinuate that they're anything other than your average top 10 receiver in terms of what they do as a person. DeAndre Hopkins has had multiple stories done on what he's been through with his mother and what she had to go through, and by all accounts has done a lot to kind of act upon what he's had to deal with. And to not be able to keep those guys in a building where you are trying to win a Super Bowl and sell them for parts, it's inexcusable. To be perfectly honest, but it's something that you can take advantage of if you're another NFL team, and that's what the Cardinals and the Bills have done. So I think it'll be very interesting to watch if any more of those things happen. Should we talk a little draft impact here? Yeah,
let's talk a little bit of draft impact. I got our mock draft up here, trying to look for situations that might change as a result. Interestingly, though, right? corner has been a position that people have signed a little bit.
Yep.
Tackle has been a position people have signed a little bit. Wide receiver, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
So are people really looking at because Vikings fans trying to clap back at my tweets about how they have no clue what they're doing right now, has said, well, there's a ton of receivers in the draft, and
Yep.
and some are even saying they should trade Anthony Harris to move up 12 picks because CeeDee Lamb is Anthony Harris better than T Higgins, and it's like
Makes tons of sense.
are teams right now overvaluing some of the certainty of wide receiver drafting right now?
That's what it would seem to lead you to believe. I refuse to believe that that's actually the case. I happen to think it's more of this is a sign of what teams are valuing right now in the NFL. What you're looking at is a glass half full, right? These signings indicate that people in the league really like the receivers in the draft, and they're going to draft them high. And I think it might be, no, all we need are interior defensive linemen and tackles, and they're still going to go incredibly high. But I would hope that it is what you've said, and I think that's when we come up with our second mock, that'll be indicated there. The big takeaway that I have right now about what the draft looks like, and this doesn't actually change our mock, but is anyone valuing quarterback, and particularly any quarterback other than Tua and Burrow, as a first-round player? And I think the evidence would say no.
Except for maybe the Chargers.
Except for the Chargers, yeah.
Yeah, because I think if I were to if I had to bet on this, I would say that the Chargers are probably in play for Herbert or Love, whichever one they like more, at 6.
Can we talk about this for a second? If that's the case, then they might just be the most brain dead. What on earth do you gain from calling Tyrod Taylor your starter right now? Absolutely nothing.
Well,
nothing.
Here's what I can say probably would be what you earn from it. I think Tyrod Taylor is Teddy Bridgewater like, in that he's revered around the league.
Okay.
So, just like, maybe to a lesser extent, but that's maybe
how does that, I think it hurts. So if I'm looking at this, if I go, so let's say that there's two options. Either I'm not going to draft a quarterback, I'm not going to sign one, and Tyrod Taylor is my guy, actually. Okay. Then your goal is to make the number 6 pick as valuable as possible, in which case you do not say Tyrod Taylor is for sure my starter. Okay. Second option is that they are going to draft a guy, and in that case, you're going to draft a guy after having said, hey, this player that you all revere, we told him he was going to be the starter, and then we draft someone, and that makes you look like a poor group of people. So I think either way, it's a bad decision.
No, I don't disagree with that. But the other, what's the alternative? The alternative is to keep Tyrod Taylor hanging, and do the exact same thing, which I don't think endears you to anybody either.
But can't you? It's possible to have a conversation with a player that is not a public statement, right? So
yeah, but I don't think that that's what was said. I don't think they said to Tyrod Taylor. I think the reports are that they're planning to go with Taylor, which is probably a report that they got from an agent or somebody in trying to sign Chris Harris. Because if I'm Chris Harris, I'm saying, okay, if I'm going to sign with the Chargers, I want to know that you at least have a plan at quarterback. And they're probably saying, look, we're going with Tyrod. And he's like, oh, cool, Tyrod's not that bad. All right, let's go. And then that gets leaked, and then that's more of what I'm saying. I agree with you that
you're being such an optimist today.
Yeah, that's sort of where I'm saying is I think to convince some players to come play there, they wanted to imply some sort of certainty at the quarterback position. Also knowing that Herbert's not starting year one anyway, because unlike any other offseason, I mean this 2011 was different.
Neither did Baker.
Yeah, but at least they had an off season. 2011's the last time we saw. 2011's the last time we saw an off season that was pretty abbreviated, and there were 4 first-round draft picks taken. And Ponder started by week 7, so he he sat behind McNabb for 6 weeks. Jake Locker sat behind Matt Hasselbeck for the whole season, and I'm trying to think of Gabbert sat behind Luke McCown for like 2 weeks, right? So like none of those teams started their, that second tier quarterback. Cam started from week 1, but like the other guys, it took them because they didn't have really an off season.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
So I would just say that they're just trying to tell people like we have a plan at starting quarterback, and the alternative is to either sign somebody that you don't actually plan to play, like a Mike Glennon or somebody like that, like how the Bears did with him, or it's to let everybody hanging. But then I don't think that gives anybody who's going to sign as a free agent much confidence.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So I'm looking through the picks here. I think the Lions letting Slay walk would indicate that Jeffrey Okudah at 3 would make a ton of sense. Now, it's interesting. If the Redskins do take Tua at 2, the Lions are sitting there with Chase Young still on the board, and we would have the Giants taking a wide receiver. We've explained this many, many times. You can go read it and hate on it on PFF.com if you would like to. I think it's a very interesting debate, and the math would lead you to take wide receiver, and so that's what we took. And then you've got the Dolphins. And I think the Dolphins are in a super interesting spot right now because if they are able to draft a Tua, then if he's good, like why can't they be the best team in the AFC East? I don't think that's totally ridiculous. That AFC East is not very good. But if they can't, why would they potentially try and package those picks? Would they try and either get a quarterback that's established? Would they move down? Would they sign a Jameis Winston? I think 5 is where it starts to get really interesting because then you have the Chargers, you have the Cardinals, then at 8. A lot of things I think could change from there on out.
I might have to eat these words, but I think the Dolphins are way too smart to draft anybody other than Tua or Burrow.
And trade down in every other situation.
Well, or just take the pick, right? Like, I mean, if Chase Young falls to them at 5, it's probably a solid pick to take him.
Oh, sure.
But I would say that the only thing for me that's off the table for the Dolphins at 5 is to take Justin Herbert or Jordan Love. I think everything else is on the table because Ryan Fitzpatrick is good enough to win 7 or 8 games with, especially with the defense that's being rebuilt, especially with another year with the coaching staff sort of more although they fired their offensive coordinator, I believe, but the more stability, and winning, if they win 9 games, they might win the AFC East. So I think continuing in a holding pattern is probably a good idea for them if they're not able to get one of the top 2 guys.
No, I agree with you. It'll be interesting to see what the Cardinals do. There's now a reason for them more so to look at tackle. But man, I would be trying to sign offensive linemen for kind of cheap and saying, hey, we're actually going to be good next year. Go get if Jerry Jeudy or Henry Ruggs are still there, just give Cliff, let Cliff cook, right? Give Kyler an opportunity to make a ton of plays, be an awesome offense. Another pick that I think is really interesting is the Tampa Bay Bucks at 14. Are they going to use that pick, or is this we're all in right now and a rookie isn't going to help us as much type deal?
I think a rookie. Well, so the problem is Brady has never done well with rookie wide receivers ever. So so that could be a product of how difficult the offense was in New England, or it could be a Brady thing. So I don't know if wide receivers a wide receiver makes sense if you think first order, but if you think second order, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for them. So do the Bucks trade back? Do they acquire maybe another offensive lineman to sort of stock up there, or do they go defense? I think trading back is a brilliant decision, especially because they've been linked to Jordan Love so much that a team that wants to get desperate and draft in there, you can trade back and take a better younger quarterback like Anthony Gordon or Jake Fromm or somebody like that later in the draft and somebody who's less threatening to Brady, if you will. Arizona, you bring up Arizona. I think the best move for Arizona is to acquire defense in that spot, because you have Kirk, you have Hopkins, you have Fitz, you have Andy Isabella, Charles Clay is a decent tight end, although I'm not exactly sure of his status. That offensive line played pretty well last year and played all the games together, more or less. And like, it's one of those where if they take our advice, they're going to say, look, our offensive line's a bunch of guys that grade in the 60s, and PFF says as long as they're together and solid, that's fine.
Sure.
Their defense is not good enough to win with in the NFC West. And, and they could use a corner. Robert Alford's currently a starter for them. Byron Murphy struggled a season ago. They've got Kennard and Phillips on the defensive line this offseason. But they could really use a secondary player. I mean, like,
what about
really,
Isaiah Simmons?
Yeah, if he's there by then, for sure. Because Reddick was a former number one pick who hasn't really worked anywhere they've used him. Jordan Hicks was acquired last year to play linebacker, and he kind of struggled a little bit. And also, like, they kind of already were putting together some positionless players in Budda Baker and so on. So that makes a lot of sense. But corner, I mean, Patrick Peterson's not going to play forever, right? Like, even if you just look at like their roster, I think if Arizona made the Hopkins move to win now, they should probably draft to accentuate that chance. And to me, just getting more players in that secondary who are halfway decent is the goal.
Going down further, it looks like the Falcons should take our advice and go corner. And they've already overpaid an edge player. It'd be very hurtful to see them double down on that in the draft. We have them taking Trayvon Diggs. And then the Cowboys are right behind them, and the Cowboys letting Byron Jones go, it would seem as though they would be in the market, to also improve their secondary. So it'll be very interesting to see where, Okudah will be gone, but like the Christian Fultons, the Trayvon Diggs, Antoine Winfield Jr., C.J. Henderson, like those guys, the Cowboys might have a really high opinion of this corner class and made it easier to part with Byron Jones. I think that'll be interesting to see. Any others?
The Cowboys have history of trading up for defensive backs that they really like. I mean, Morris Claiborne was somebody who, I'm trying to remember how much they gave up, but they moved into the top 5 just to draft him. I think if Okudah falls, like let's say he gets to pick 5, that might be the place where the Dolphins move back and Dallas goes up and gets him, because they've done that historically. I think that's something that could very well happen.
I like that a lot. That's good. We'll try and do a second iteration of our mock next week. I have a couple things left. The first one is Todd Gurley's on the trading block. What are you giving up for Todd Gurley?
Did you see my tweet there? So they're talking to they're in discussions about Gurley, and I was like, I thought I was the only one who talked to myself.
That's good. I said maybe they're looking for doomsday supplies. I doubt that anyone would part with toilet paper in exchange for Todd Gurley.
The Rams are another example of a team that I think is not stupid, but makes stupid decisions.
That contract looks as bad as we said it was. And, we get a ton of things wrong. This one was not one of them. These huge running back contracts are absolutely stupid, and there's no other way to put it. The Todd Gurley contract, the Zeke Elliott contract,
he was different,
he's
though.
Just dumb. Yeah, right. He was different, like Leonard Fournette, like all these running backs before him.
Every one of them
I
is different.
I can't think of a single thing that would make me excited about giving up an asset for Todd Gurley. And I tweeted this yesterday, but Todd Gurley is going to be the player who, in order for someone to take his contract, you should be getting a first or second round pick in addition to Todd Gurley. I should be getting something to take on his salary, and a team that doesn't have a legit shot at winning a Super Bowl this year should do it.
Here's one. Here's one I like. The Patriots.
Wow. That's brilliant.
Right?
The problem is that the Rams don't really have any picks to trade.
Yeah.
So, like, I could see. Yeah.
You make 100% sense, but the Pats don't eat. The Pats want to get a second round for Sanu back.
That's true.
But they have Sony Michel. That's the problem. They already have the engine.
That I love the Patriots doing that. That would fit so perfectly with what they should be doing. They take on Todd Gurley. They get a couple of future picks back. They play the long game. And you know what? You know what'd be really funny? What they'll do is Todd Gurley will play well for the Patriots, and then they'll end up flipping him for actually, something in return for some, they'll trade him to Bill O'Brien in 2 years or something when he's had this miraculous knee resurrection, and they'll actually get whatever picks are left from the Houston Texans. All right. Anything else before we get to Cincy Y stories?
Oh, that's right. No, I just want to, for all you people that have been listening during this time, I know it's been a trying time for everybody. We really appreciate you guys listening to our show. It's been a lot of fun connecting, just the two of us every single day and talking football. Hopefully we continue that during this, this off season. But thank you all for listening.
I second that. Someone asked, a Steelers fan, in that vein, I think we should try and answer some questions real quick. Steelers fan, at Steelers Dad 1989, asked about, is Dupree really that bad of a tagging for the Steelers? He only had one good season. Maybe that's the season. And I would say it is not smart to say, hey, this latest season is the only one that matters, given the propensity for everything else to have been bad. And it accentuates itself, I think, with edge, because those are players that you can get cheaply and can perform well, and you're paying a premium for a player that has by and large not performed well.
Yeah, the only comeback I'll have to that is that there's a chance, I think. Well, for one thing, I believe defensive linemen are all considered the same, right? So it's like franchise tagging a guard is a dumb idea because they get the same tag as a tackle, and I think if Dupree got the linebacker tag, it's a smaller amount. I agree with you that fundamentally I don't like Dupree as a player because he's only had the one good season, and we've seen that Nick Perry was that way for the Packers, and there's a ton of edge players that somehow randomly figure it out when it's the year N-1 of their contract, but there is an issue. I think I actually have to find how much he was tagged for, but if he's tagged as a
15.8.
Yeah, so is that really? That's five. If he hits the open market, he's probably making 2 or 3 more per year than that. And so I do think there are inefficiencies in the tag, right? If you can tag a tackle, an edge player, tagging a corner's probably bad because again, the way that the salaries are working out. But so it really just depends.
An outside linebacker.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, that's not as bad of a move because he's being paid like what Anthony Barr is being paid. But it really makes you wonder. Okay, the issue with the tag is what if he performs as well as you think he's going to perform? Then you're stuck, right? And we saw that with Justin Houston. We saw that with Eric Berry. We say those inevitably end poorly. And if he stinks, why did you tag him in the first place? Is really, and so it's tough. So I don't think it's the worst move in the world, but I wouldn't expect great things out of him in 2020.
Okay. Yeah, thanks to everyone for tuning in. We did a couple of extra pods this week in the hopes that maybe a couple people got a few more hours of something to do. It's been a fun week. We will not be podding tomorrow, but we'll be back on Monday of next week. Before we do Cincy Y, you can head to pff.com. You can read all of the live blogging, the deal grader, all that stuff. Plus, there's a promo code, NFL 2020, so you get 25% off. This is your opportunity to buy into something at a lower price and see the payment off at the end. It's a really good deal, and we're going to do as much as we can to give you guys some really good products leading up to the season, which I am bullish is going to happen. All right. Cincy Y in your home. How's it going?
Oh man, yesterday it rained cats and dogs, so I didn't get to have my run. I ran the other day for the first time in a month because of my calf. So that was exciting, although I'm not sure I'm quite strong, but a lot of push-ups, a lot of sit-ups, George.
Okay.
That's kind of it right now. What about you?
So I'm in California, and it's been sunny for the first few days. So I've been going on like a long run, and I haven't seen a whole lot of people, as you would expect. But whenever I do see someone, so like I'm not a good runner. I'm a very poor runner, to be honest with you. But I force myself to do it because it's good for you. And so I'm huffing and puffing my way down like mile 3.5 or whatever, and I'll see someone. And I find myself going out of my way to run 6 feet around because I don't want them thinking that, my huffing and puffing is going to, give them the virus or anything like that if I were to be carrying it. So that's my one takeaway from outside activities. Yesterday it was raining here. So I'm in the garage and my level of creativity had to go up a new notch. I was side shuffling lengths of the garage. I was bear crawling lengths of the garage. I've probably done like thousands of burpees at this point. I hate burpees now, but I am doing at some point, like a month from now, I'll probably be doing things that I've never even imagined to just try and stay in shape because I'm quarantining. So good luck to all of you out there. This is not an excuse. This is not an excuse to not stay in shape. Let me just point that out. Yoga, lots of things you can do. So
yeah, just maybe not. Well, hot yoga, would that kill the virus? I feel like it would get if we went historically, but I don't know. But it would the problem is heat has an adverse effect on people who are sick. So,
right.
So I would just go
heating
traditional
your home
yoga.
is expensive.
Right, and although oil is at an all-time gas is like 89 cents right now.
No, that is true.
Yeah, all these variables that we're thinking about right now when we could be thinking about football.
This is true. Anyways, my big point is to everyone out there, all 5 of you that are listening, this is not an excuse. Keep it going. You too, big dog. That's all I've got. Eric, stay safe, man. See you guys.